"I'll be late," Daniel said, and the call ended before she could ask how late, which told her everything the two words hadn't. Vivian set her phone on the table beside the anniversary dinner she had made herself. Not because she needed to prove something to anyone watching, but because she had made this dinner every year for 9 years, and the ritual had its own momentum. And she had not yet decided whether this year was different or simply more honest about what it had always been. She sat down. She ate. She looked at the candles she had lit without examining why she had lit them. The good plates she had used without asking herself who she was using them for. And she thought about the quality of Daniel's voice on the phone, which had the specific flatness of someone managing guilt that had aged past acute and settled into chronic. She had been hearing that flatness for 2 years without naming it. She named it now. She did not cry. She poured a second glass of wine and thought clearly for the first time in a long time, which was what happened when you stopped organizing your thoughts around what you wanted to be true and let them organize themselves around what was. Daniel came home at 2 in the morning. She was in bed, not sleeping. She heard his key in the door and the careful quiet of a man trying not to wake someone he had already wronged. And she lay in the dark and listened to the sounds of her marriage in its actual state and made the first of several decisions. The first decision was that she was not going to have the conversation that night, not because she was afraid of it, and not because she wanted to preserve something that had already ended, but because a conversation at 2 in the morning with a man still managing the choreography of a lie was a conversation on his terms, in his time, in the emotional register of his choosing. She would have the conversation she needed to have when she was ready, and ready looked nothing like this. She went to sleep. She spent the next 3 weeks in a state that felt like calm and was actually something more deliberate, a focused, methodical attention to everything she had not been paying attention to for 9 years. She was not passive. She had never been passive. She had simply been applying her intelligence to the wrong problem, to the maintenance of a marriage rather than to the understanding of what the marriage contained. What it contained was substantial. Her name was Vivian Ashford. She had been Vivian Crane before the wedding, and before the marriage she had been a corporate attorney with 8 years of practice in asset and business law, which was a fact Daniel had always treated as biographical rather than operational. She had left the firm when they married because Daniel's company was growing and needed legal work, and it made sense, structurally, for her to move in-house. She had moved in-house and spent 9 years doing work that was corporate attorney work in every substantive sense, without the title or the billing rate or the professional independence those implied. She knew the company as well as anyone alive. She knew the asset structure, the subsidiary architecture, the partnership agreements and their termination clauses, the board composition and its vulnerabilities, the 3 contracts that were load-bearing, and the 4 that were legacy liabilities Daniel had never gotten around to unwinding, because unwinding them required attention he preferred to spend elsewhere. She knew the company the way you know something you have handled every day for 9 years, completely, functionally, with the specific knowledge of someone who has fixed the things that broke, and therefore understands exactly what makes them break. She called her former colleague James Whitmore on a Tuesday. James was a partner now at the firm she had left, specializing in corporate restructuring and marital asset division, which was a combination the universe had arranged specifically for this phone call. They had lunch on Thursday, and she told him what she knew, and what she wanted, and what she was willing to spend to get it. And James looked at her across the table with the expression of a lawyer who has been given a very good case and is trying not to show how good he thinks it is. "Tell me about the Crane holding structure," he said. She told him. She had 40 minutes of uninterrupted content on the Crane holding structure, because Crane Holdings was the entity she had spent 9 years building the legal framework for. and whose name was her own maiden name, which Daniel had suggested as a tribute when they founded it in year 2 of the marriage, and which she had accepted as the gesture it appeared to be, and which she now understood was a gesture with a very long tail. James took notes for 35 of the 40 minutes and then set his pen down. "You have a prenuptial agreement?" he said. "A standard one," she said. "Executed in the first year of the marriage, before Crane Holdings existed, before the subsidiary structure, before the 3 major acquisition years. The agreement covers the assets at marriage. It does not cover the 9 years of asset development that followed. And your contribution to that development is documented?" "I am the document trail," she said. "Every contract, every negotiation summary, every board memo, every due diligence report for 9 years. My name is on the work even when it isn't in the title." James looked at his notes. "What outcome are you looking for?" "I'm not looking to punish him," she said. "I'm looking to be accurately compensated for what I built." A pause. "The distinction matters. It matters legally too," James said. "Judges respond differently to accuracy than to punishment." "I know," she said. "I used to be a lawyer." He smiled. "You still are," he said. She did not tell Daniel she had seen James. She went home and continued the life she was leading with the surface unchanged and the foundation entirely different, the way buildings sometimes continue standing after the thing that held them has shifted. She was not performing normalcy. She was purchasing time, which was a different thing, because she needed 60 more days to understand the complete picture before she moved. In those 60 days, she learned 3 things she had not known. The first was the woman's name, which was Kara, and the duration, which was not 2 years as she had estimated from the flatness in his voice, but closer to 4, which meant the marriage she had been maintaining for the past 4 years had been maintained alone. This information did not break her. It reorganized her, the way information does when it arrives late, and explains things that had been sitting unexplained for longer than you realized. The second was a business decision Daniel had made 14 months earlier without consulting her, which was structurally required by the partnership agreement she had drafted, and which he had therefore violated, not illegally, but in a way that had legal consequences for the terms of the partnership and for the leverage distribution within Crane Holdings. She had not known because Daniel had routed the communication through a channel she did not normally monitor, which told her the omission was intentional. The third was a conversation she was not supposed to hear, because she came home early from a lunch that ended faster than expected, and the conversation was happening in Daniel's office on the phone, and she was in the hallway before she understood she was overhearing it. He was talking to someone about the post-divorce restructuring. He had already spoken to a lawyer. He had a timeline. The timeline was 6 weeks. He was describing a restructuring that would move the primary assets of Crane Holdings into a new entity before any divorce proceedings began, which was the kind of move that was sometimes legal and sometimes not, and was always the kind that required someone not to see it coming. She stood in the hallway and listened to the complete description of what he had planned. Then she went to the kitchen and made tea and sat at the table and thought about the word invisible, which she had applied to herself at various points over the past 2 years in the dark private language of a person watching their own diminishment. And she thought about how invisibility, applied correctly, was not a wound but a strategy. He had not seen her in the hallway. He did not know what she had heard. He did not know she had seen James. He did not know she had spent 60 days building a complete and accurate picture of the asset structure, the documented contribution history, and the partnership agreement violation. He was operating on the assumption that she was not paying attention because he had spent 9 years in a household organized around his not being seen clearly, and the habit of not being seen had become, For him, a belief that he could not be seen. She called James that evening. "He's planning a preemptive restructuring," she said. "I have the timeline and the structure. He has 6 weeks. You have 2, James said. If we move in 2, we're ahead of the restructuring, and the violation becomes the leverage point. Then we move in 2, she said. On a Thursday morning, 14 days after the hallway conversation, Daniel was served with papers at his office. She knew approximately when it happened because his assistant, who had always been fonder of Vivian than of Daniel, sent a message that said only, "Done." She was at the kitchen table when it arrived, with a coffee she had made that morning and not finished, and she sat there for a moment with a specific quality of stillness that belongs to the end of something. He called 11 times in 4 hours. She let all 11 go to voicemail and read the transcripts her phone generated with the same attention she brought to any document, completely, without the emotional register its author intended, looking for information. The calls moved through stages. The first 3 were controlled and used words like discuss and misunderstanding and let's be reasonable. The 4th was less controlled. The 5th through 8th were variations on the position of someone who has discovered the preemptive move he planned is no longer available. The 9th was quiet in a way the previous 8 had not been. The 10th was an attempt to return to controlled. The 11th said he wanted to meet. She met him the following week at a restaurant she had chosen, neutral ground in the sense that it was not a place they had history, and her territory in the sense that she had eaten there a dozen times with colleagues and felt entirely comfortable. He looked diminished, not broken. Daniel was not a man who broke. He was a man who recalibrated, but smaller, the particular smallness of someone whose assumptions about a situation have been fully corrected and who has not yet finished adjusting to the corrected version. "You knew about the restructuring plan," he said. "I did," she said. "How long?" "Long enough," she said. He looked at the table. The partnership agreement violation. The Harmon acquisition. "I knew when I did it that it was outside the consultation requirement. I know you knew," she said. "I thought," he stopped, "I thought it wouldn't matter." "You thought I wasn't paying attention," she said. "You've thought that for a long time." He looked at her with the expression she had been waiting, without knowing she was waiting. 9 years for, the expression of someone seeing her fully, accurately, and too late. It was not gratifying in the way she might have expected. It was simply true, which was its own category of satisfaction, quieter and more durable. "What do you want?" he said. "Crane Holdings," she said. "The primary operating entity and its 3 major subsidiaries. I will leave you the legacy liabilities, which you created and which are your problem, and the 2 real estate assets which are clean and which you can liquidate to cover the transition costs." She paused. "The name is mine anyway." He was quiet for a long time. "That's the whole company," he said. "That's the company I built," she said. "The distinction is accurate, and I think you know it." Another silence. Outside the window, the city moved in its ordinary way, entirely unconcerned with the conversation at this particular table, which was a quality of cities she had always found useful, their absolute indifference to individual reckoning. "James Whitmore is a very good lawyer," Daniel said. "He is," she said. "So am I." He looked at her. "You should have stayed practicing." "I did practice," she said. "I practiced every day for 9 years on everything you built, and I have the document trail that proves it." She picked up her water glass. "I'm resuming the practice officially. The name on the door will be Crane." She had not decided this before she said it. She decided it while saying it, which sometimes happened when you had been thinking about something without knowing you were thinking about it. And when the thinking surfaced, it arrived already complete. He nodded slowly. The nod of someone accepting a verdict rather than agreeing with an argument, which was the correct distinction, and she appreciated that he made it. The settlement took 8 weeks to finalize. James was excellent. She was better, on her own documents, than anyone could have been from the outside. Daniel's lawyers were good and expensive and operating on half the information available in the room, which was not their fault and was entirely determinative. She got Crane Holdings. She got the primary operating entity and the 3 major subsidiaries and the name that was always hers. She got the document trail that proved 9 years of contribution, entered into the record not as a claim but as an established fact. She got the clean accounting of what she had built, stated plainly in legal language, which was the only language in which she had ever fully trusted plain statements. She did not get an apology. She had not asked for one. Apologies required the other person's participation, which made them contingent, and she had spent 9 years accepting contingent things and was done with contingency. She called her sister on the evening the settlement was signed. "Are you all right?" her sister asked. "I'm accurate," Vivian said. Her sister was quiet for a moment. "Is that the same thing?" Vivian thought about the anniversary dinner eaten alone, the 2 years of named flatness, the 4 years of unnamed flatness before it. The hallway, the 60 days, the 14 days, the settlement, the name on the door that was going to say Crane. She started the practice 3 months later. The name on the door said exactly what she had said it would say. The first client was a referral from James, which she had not expected, and which told her something about James that she had already suspected. The second was a woman she had met at a conference 12 years ago, who had seen the announcement and called that afternoon. The third came through the Crane Holdings board, which she now chaired, where someone had mentioned needing outside counsel, and someone else had said her name. Daniel remarried 14 months later. She read the announcement the way she read anything about Crane Holdings, as information relevant to conditions she was monitoring, briefly and with appropriate attention, and no more than that. She sent nothing. She was in a board meeting when she heard, and when it ended she went back to her office and looked at the city through the window with her name on the glass outside it, and she thought about 9 years and about the word invisible, and about what it meant that the word had been spoken by someone looking directly at her when he said it. He had been looking directly at her and had not seen her. He had needed her to be invisible, because visibility would have required him to account for what she was worth, and accounting for her worth would have made certain things impossible that he had needed to be possible. She understood this without anger, which had taken time and was the product of time, and she set it down and looked at the city and thought about the next quarter and the new client coming in on Thursday, and the clause in the Harmon Partnership Agreement that still had 2 years of useful leverage if she decided to use it. She had not decided yet. She had time. That was the thing that had changed above all the other things. Time that was entirely hers, spent on work that was entirely hers, building something that carried her name because she had built it, and not because someone had offered her name as a gesture with a long and unpredictable tail. Some people will let you build their empire and call it partnership and believe, because it is convenient to believe that the building and the builder are separate things that can be separated cleanly when convenience requires it. They are wrong about this, and the wrongness eventually becomes structural, and structural wrongness has a way of surfacing at the exact moment the person who was most convenient not to see is the most prepared to be seen. She had been prepared for 9 years. She turned from the window and went back to work.